The early boat builders of Pinellas County were an extraordinary collection of hard-working craftsmen who used their talent and ingenuity to pioneer the art of boat building in our coastal community. One such individual was Don Heiser, who worked with Clark Mills, the designer of the Optimus Pram, at Clearwater Marineways. He tells his story in his own words.
I'm originally from Ohio. Come down here 60 years ago. When I come out of service, I went into construction work. I worked for a big construction company. We built bridges. I operated heavy equipment for the company, a company called West Purdy Company. And so I thought I'd come south, had got slack work in the wintertime because of the snow and that. So I'd come down south because I had some distant relation lived down here for a visit, and it was in the wintertime, no snow, sun was shining, and the beach looked beautiful, and so we come back. So I come down here, got a job working for a company because I tried several of the construction companies and they wasn't hiring. Worked for a company called Clearwater Boats, which is just behind the post office on Railroad Street there. And I worked there for, a year, not quite. And I run across a fella who was the Sea Scouts, which was a guy by the name of Harry Knapp. He owned Knapp Marineways, which is down behind North Ward School, off of North Fort Harrison. And that was built down in there. It was the old Brumby Marineways, and he was, I believe, city engineer at one time for him, and then he retired and built the marina. And had an old table lift to haul boats out of the water. And that's when I started running the yard and worked there, and that's where I met Clark Mills. Clark and a fellow by the name of Frank Levinson bought Knapp Marine out, and so that's how I got tied up.
Tell me the story about how you found out about that.
Well, it was amazing. I thought quite a bit of Harry Knapp. He was a nice fella. He was a real nice fella, hard worker, and Harry had a 35-foot lap straight Chris Craft. And he was getting ready to take a trip, so I thought. At least that was my impression at the time, so I went out to the gas dock and helped him fuel up. And he got all fueled up and got all his stuff on, and he and his wife, and he says, well, you take care and I'll see you later. I said, well, have a good trip, Harry. At the time, I didn't know it, but he was gone for good. I turned around to walk off the gas dock and walked down the docks along past some of the boats, and a young gentleman come up to me and he says, are you Don Heiser? And I said, yes, sir. Can I help you? He said, well, I'm Frank Levinson. And he says, I'm one of the new owners with Clark Mills. And I says, very confusing, but I was asked him, well, what happens now? Because I said, I didn't know what was going on. Well, they wanted me to run the yard for them while they got all their settled things and moved in. But that's how I come to meet Clark Mills. I had heard of him and met him one time before that, but never long discussions or anything. So he finally got settled into our boatyard down there, and we had a old-fashioned Quonset hut, World War II, was about 125 foot long, and I think it was 48 foot deep, and about 26 foot high, and all steel. Of course, very pleasant to work in the summertime. But we basically built all our boats in that shed, and Clark and I worked together for hand in hand, side by side for 25 years, and then he had a heart attack and slowed down a little, and then I they took over running the yard. I managed the yard for him, and he and I worked together and played together. We had a lot of fun times. We was, I guess, known for the boatyard with the fish fries. Well, it was started out as a couple of the old people from Clearwater, the Hammer Lumber Yard, Jimmy and his brother, Charlie, and they'd come down and we'd sit down Friday night and tell a few lies, drink a couple of beers, and tell us what run on in the week and what happened about the fishing and so on. And somebody got hungry one night and said, we ought to have some fish, fry some fish. So everything sort of bundled together. After about 2-3 weeks, we ended up with a cast iron skillet and an old blowtorch. And we used regular oil for a while, and we finally started buying peanut oil we cook them in. Got real professional about it. Well, it grew into the fact that we finally ended up, we'd invite the crew and their families. So the wives usually come down with the covered dish, coleslaw, baked beans, etc., some dessert. But we furnished the fish, the hush puppies, and some Coke and a couple of beers, and we'd all sit down and have a good time being close friends and work together. It finally grew to nothing. We'd have customers coming too. We'd end up with 50 people easy. Well, we built quite a few sailboats and some power boats. We built some Alden sloops. In fact, we built 3 of those, almost identical. Built it for the Calusa, it was for Bob Wickman. And then we built the TT, that was for a couple out of Texas. And then we built one for Dr. Fry. He was out of Tennessee. And then we built a couple other sailboats, a couple ketches, one yaw, and we built some strip length boats. We built quite a few of the strip length boats. I guess it was just a thing that a lot of people took into it and made it fairly easy building in a way compared to conventional planking. And of course we used all kinds of woods. We used teak, quite a bit of teak for putting in the back, what we call the backbone. It would be the stem and the keel and all the floor timbers and stuff. We used oak for steam bent frames, and we used mahogany for planking and juniper for planking. We did use some cypress, but not that much really. Juniper's sort of a neighbor of the cypress family anyways, and it grew readily well here in Florida and along the Gulf Coast and up into North Carolina. So we got that, and we used to buy quite a bit of it, anywhere from 10 to 15, 20,000 board feet. And that lasted us for a while till we air dried it. Usually got it fairly dry, but we wanted drier. Some of it come green, so we'd stick it and cover it with tar paper and then let it dry, and we used it that way. But we used to get some virgin, I thought virgin timber, because some of the cypress or some of the juniper boards were 18, 20 inches in width, and they were, of course, sod board. We didn't buy much, very little, if anywhere possible. We didn't buy any quarter sawn wood, all slab wood, and we then fashioned what we needed out of that. We'd plane it, the size. We'd order it in a little in 2-inch and some in 1.5 inches, and what we call 4/4, 5/4, 6/4. and then we'd plane it to what we need. We had big planers. We had a big 12-inch 5-horse planer, and we had a couple of big table saws and a bandsaw. We had a 36-inch bandsaw we got some of our stuff with, and a couple 12-inch. We had sort of minimum in tools, I think, except for hand tools. And a lot of times we manufactured our own hand tools to do the job. But it was fun. We enjoyed it. And Clark was quite a joker all day long. He was had quite a sense of humor. And he was great for being on time. He was ready to go to work wherever we got there, and we worked hard and we played hard. He was a good man. We really enjoyed him. Optimus Pram, from what Clark had told me, his story was, Mr. Green, with the Optimus Club, come to him and says, Clark, can we build a boat that represents the down here little coasters that the kids use with the, he says, you know, they could build these little racers with it. So Clark says, well, let's see what we do. And he says, well, the only thing about it, he says, they have to be so dad and son can build it. And he says, Clark said, well, that's good. I like that idea real well. So he designed a pram out of 2 sheets of plywood. You can make your sail or buy the sail. And it didn't take you long. It didn't need to be a master mechanic to build it, because it was designed for that reason, for the kids to enjoy and sail and learn about sailing. So he designed it, built it, and they was real happy about it. That's how they started the prams. And I don't know how many have been built throughout this country. And of course, the only reason that I know of why the Optimus Pram is not represented in the Olympics is because Clark didn't fly, because they wanted him to fly to Sweden. And he says, you come here and do anything you want, but I won't go fly over to Sweden. I don't like to fly. So that's the reason he didn't get that. And he told me that, and I said, Clark, you're silly. You should have flown. No, not me. I'm not going to fly. So he didn't. Well, we found out we were building the catamarans, the double eagles at the time, and we had to scarf this plywood. We didn't want to use butts.
What's scarfing? What is that?
Scarfing is when you take it and cut it, plywood like 3/4. You go from 3/4 down to nothing on the edge, and do the same thing. And you match those two together and glue them together, and that way you got a scarf. Where if you had to just butt them together, then you had to use what they call a butt plate on the inside. There's always a chance for that to crink out, make a little ridge there. You'd have to cut some of the planking off. So we tried it by hand with electric plane. Found out it took us about 48 minutes, almost 50 minutes to do 4 sides of the 1 sheet of plywood. So we figured that wasn't going to work too well. So Clark and I decided, and he started engineering, and he got me in on it. We took some stuff and made a bench out of some old wood that we got out of the Tarpon schoolhouse. And these are floor joists, and these floor joists are called 2-inch by 12-inch by 32 foot long. Actually, they were about 2 1/4, 2 5/8 by maybe almost 13 inches deep. But they was hard pine, old Dade County longleaf hard pine, and harder than a rock. After we made the bench flat and leveled it out, about 12 foot long, we took a wood joiner, turned it upside down, so we used the blades on that, motor on top, and we set a sheet of 3/4 inch plywood on there and 2 clamps on each end with a bar. So between 2 of us changing the bars and me running the scarfer, we could scarf a 3/4 inch sheet of plywood in about 8 minutes. And it was so amazing to the guy that sold us the plywood, because we'd buy about, I think we bought about a half a carload of plywood at a time, marine plywood. That the guy that sold it to us told the manufacturer rep when he come here to talk to him about more lumber, and he said he had to come down and see that. So he took pictures of it. He says, we got one back in them days then. He says, cost us $50,000 to make, and he says, you got a $20 rig and you're scarfing plywood. But we had to scarf almost 4 miles of plywood. That's including 1/4 inch, 3/8, 1/2 inch, and 3/4 when we built the double eagles. And so it's just one of the many tools we used to have to make to get by on. And but it was fun. It was a challenge. Really enjoyed it. Times and things that we did to just improvise for what we need. It was temporary, but it done the job for what we had to do. Of course, we used to do a lot of liner work, and we made a lot of our own patterns for all the cleats and the hawser holes and other hinges and stuff that goes on. We'd, of course, take those, and they was out of bronze, so we'd have them cast over in Tampa. Of course, let's face it, back in them days, Tampa was the hub for getting marine equipment, because in Clearwater, we were still coastal towns and small towns as far as Tampa was concerned. So most of your marine supplies all come from Tampa area. And that's a thing that's way in the past now. You're only a phone call away, but we used to have to wait for the man come once or twice a week to deliver our parts, and deliver our nails, bolts, paint. We used a lot of hold-fast bronze, some of the stainless steel, and of course they were a special grade that we used in those, and nickel plated a lot. But yeah, we had a lot of times getting equipment we need. And we used to go to...
Your sales and everything.
Well, we used to get those out of... Johnson Sales used to make a lot of our sales. And there was a couple other smaller companies as Johnson finally passed on, and brothers passed on, and one thing to another, and then we had to get down to smaller sale companies. But we had a few had done, and Morgan's done a couple for us, Morgan Sales. But most of those was the only thing. Now, we bought all our engines from big suppliers like General Motors. Our Detroits come out of Tampa. As the years went on, we got into different types of diesels, and we'd buy a lot of them out of Miami. And they was pretty good about it. They had about a 2-day delivery, so they'd be here with no problem. And we used some pretty good sized engines from the little small prams with just a small sail. We used the big V12s in the catamaran, so it's quite a bit different in power. We built the 65-foot catamarans for Bill Gilmore, and we built a 57-foot sailboat for Bill Gilmore. Now, he sailed that up the East Coast and back and around, and they're using it as a charter boat down out of the main marina over here. But yeah, we'd build him that, quite a few others. We built a couple of different strip plank boats for a lawyer out of Washington, D.C., and we had a lot of the local people used to come down and watch us build, so we always had a nice crowd of people around we could talk to while we worked. Interesting people. We had a lot of the old winter visitors come down and watch us build and talk about where they're from and so on. And we got an interesting group, really did. Well, I think in some of the biggest problems we had was acquiring some of the material we did, but we was able to do that pretty easily after a while. But I think handling the bulk of the boat and getting it turned upside down, because some of these boats, or most of the boats, the hulls was built upside down, and then we had to turn them. And that was always a big challenge. And like the first double eagle we built, we finally got it all built, put together, and then they had to we had hired a house mover to move it from Clearwater Bay Marineways docks over to the Seminole docks, where they kind of launched it over there. And that was an all-day process. And it was neither here nor go, because the house builder we built, hired to move the boat, he was an old-timer around here. And I think every one of the blocks he had was round and wasn't square. We questioned a lot of the blocking he did, but it worked. He knew what he was doing, and it was amazing. Here's another one that we picked out of the bushes. He knew his business. He worked hard, and he was good. We enjoyed having him there.
He got her done.
His trucks didn't look real professional compared to today, but they done the job. He had a couple 6x6 from World War II that he was using, so we had an average of, in the summertime, we run about 23, 24. In the wintertime, we'd pick up about 4 or 5 more people. So we was around about 27 people we'd run. But I usually ended up setting all the engines, the big engines, on the motor beds and lining them up, drilling the shaft logs, and lining up the struts and things like that. So, which is a pretty heavy job. And Clark helped me off and on, but we get started. He usually done a lot of the, like when we was laying a keel up for a plank boat, he'd usually cut all the rabbets and veered him, and that's where the plank meets the keel and buttons in. And he enjoyed doing that. And he's not much of a fiberglasser. He didn't like it, really. He says, no, it didn't make any fiberglass trees. But I remember one particular job we had a rudder, and they wanted to get that rudder fiberglass so it'd be just to clean it up the next day and they could get on with something else we was planning. And Clark went in, and it was after hours and the shop was closed, so we went in and got the pen, got the resins out. And the only thing about it was that Clark picked up 2 cans of hardener instead of one resin, one hardener, and he worked like the devil and put that glass all over that rudder, both sides. And we come in the next morning, it was all laying on the floor. So back to square one. We laughed about that for quite a while. In fact, we ribbed him quite a while about him being a fiberglass man.
He liked sticking with wood, though. He
was wood. He knew it. He was great. He had a lot of design, and he had a lot of talent and design work and stuff. And I can't say it's a talent he had, but he did play the harmonica. We go off sailing in a little sailboat that he and I built for ourselves to use after nights and on the weekends. We built a plywood boat, 24 foot long. We called it the Seacock. And we made as many bunks in it as we could because we didn't get much rest, so we'd sleep down and somebody'd steer. We'd sail that, I don't know how many times we sailed it from Clearwater to Sarasota. We had some good friends, some boat builders down in Sarasota, the Lazier brothers. Yeah. And they built some beautiful boats too. So we'd go down there and spend the weekend and then sail back. And But that was a lot of fun because back in them days, you could sail up and down the coast, and you only had a few landmarks you went by, like the city or the Fort Harrison light. They had a light on Fort Harrison. Didn't have many buoys. And then we get down, Indian Rocks had a water tower, I remember. Then we got Don Juan Hotel, and then we'd pass Egmont. So those are the landmarks. Like Clark says, we use that dog navigation, don't we? And I said, yeah. I said, somebody says, what's that dog navigation? I said, well, you sail off from shore, don't hear the dogs bark anymore, and you turn around and go back till you hear the dogs, and then you sail back out. That was dog navigation we used quite a bit. We had one box compass, and we lay it down at the bottom of the cockpit. It slipped back and forth, and we'd just take our foot and move it over where we wanted it. But we used to have a lot of fun.
It worked.
It worked. But I sailed the Southern Circuit, the Florida Circuit, with a crew. Dr. Meany owned a boat out of Bradenton, and we had quite a few old boat builders and old sailors on there. We used to get together every once a year, but haven't seen them lately. But the tugboat, yeah, I worked for Clark for about 25 years, and he says, well, he started this, he took a Suncat hull, and he made a little tugboat out of it, put a little engine in it, and he says he christened it the Don Heiser, because he says anybody who works for me can stand to work for me for 25 years needs a boat. So I enjoyed it so much because it was a challenge every day, and never had to worry about me getting up on the work. I enjoyed it. I did enjoy it. Like I said, you never made much money, but we had a lot of fun.
Well, back then they didn't have modern tools and the internet to rely on to solve their problems. Just hard work and Yankee ingenuity to overcome their challenges. Other craftsmen were building boats for uses like commercial fishing and competitive sailing in Pinellas County back then. We'll listen to their stories next time on Boat Builders of Pinellas County. Thank you for watching.